Yeah, welcome to the Making of Me podcasts, where we explore the stories, experience, and challenges that shape us into who we have become. Today's guest is Marie Sokoles, also known as the fashion therapist, a transformative stylist and licensed psychotherapist who help people align their inner confidence with their outer style. It's really a pleasure having you on the show, Marisa.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, Mauricio, what were some of the experience or challenges that shape you into who you have become today?
I was born with a deeply creative sense of life, an expansive and creative sense of life. And my family is all artists. I also had this deep sense that I wanted to be of support to people and support them through their healing. With that, in a more traditional way, I took the path of getting a master's in social work so that I could support people. And, I couldn't believe at the time that I could get paid to essentially love people, care for them. And over time, that felt really right. And I was really missing this creative part of myself. I feel like I was at a crossroads at certain points in my life when I could have gone. I sang and I acted, and I could have gone in one direction, but I chose to go in this direction. They felt very separate to me. And it started to feel like the creative piece was missing, was truly missing. And so I would try to find creative outlets on the side, but in the world that I was living and working in, which was a government job as a social worker, a great job for being a social worker. But all of that creative expression was being suppressed. So, for example, my boss once told me, you are a star and we don't have stars here. And I couldn't believe that he was saying that. At the same time, I was really appreciative that he said that, because what he's saying is this is a place where we work together in a particular way and we have expectations and we follow these particular guidelines, and you're basically coloring outside the lines. So it was good information, it was honesty, and also it's sad, right? Because we are whole people. We are not just one part of ourselves. And so at that point I started to think, how can I not just do both of these things separately, but how can I marry them so that I'm living in a holistic way always? So I made a very difficult decision because, here in the States, a government job is most of the time very secure. There's good pay, you're constantly working up a financial pay scale. And yeah, it's something, especially in the world of social work, that people really value. And so, in some ways, I had kind of the best situation that I could have as a social worker, but I wasn't fulfilled. And I was starting to get questioned and criticized and just noticed in a way that wasn't good for me what I was wearing. So it was like, that's not appropriate, that's too bold, this and that. So it's like everywhere I went, my creative expression got smaller and smaller, or was being asked to be smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I would go through my friends' closets for fun and for free. I'd have them, serve me lunch. And they would start saying things like, this is really incredibly valuable. Like I feel very different. I feel transformed. And something like they would say, there's something more going on. And so I started to imagine what it would be like to actually marry my expertise and experience in the world of art and fashion with my desire to help people and make it make sense, because it didn't actually surprise me that people were feeling transformed, because I am working through the lens of a therapist. So of course I'm seeing the deeper things, I'm reading between the lines, etc. So I went out, I decided I was going to leave this job. It was a very challenging decision. It scared me to death. I wrote my supervisor a letter. I was crying, all the things. Like, I just couldn't believe that I was doing this. Somebody said to me, wait, you can leave? Because it's known as the golden handcuffs, which I would maybe alternately describe as the bronze handcuffs, especially in my situation where I wasn't living out all parts of myself. So, before I tell a little bit more of this story, I just want to kind of say, because for the people who are listening, and you tell the people you're interviewing are telling these beautiful, authentic stories of big risks, living fully into themselves, taking not the challenge as the solution, but as the opportunity for growth, the suffering and pain as the opportunity for growth. And essentially, in my world, at the ripe age of 30, and I was single or not married yet. And I was saying, okay, I'm going to do this thing that financially is very risky. I'm going to go out and I'm going to build a business on my own. So I left, much to the surprise of a lot of the people, and I was immediately diagnosed with cancer. Like the next month, right? I was using the final benefits from my government job, and I was diagnosed with cancer, which was one of those things. So first of all, it wasn't necessarily fatal. It could have been, but it wasn't for me. And it was one of those things where you're sitting at the edge of a major decision, and all of a sudden the universe, and I don't know why the universe does this sometimes, that it says, I'm going to test. I'm going to test you. Are you brave enough? Are you sure? Are you sure you're ready to live wholly and fully into yourself? And, at that point, we have that second really big decision, because we could walk right back to the thing that's good enough or not good at all. And instead, I kept moving forward, and I actually used it as an opportunity to say, I think this was a medical issue, of course, but also in part from an emotional standpoint had a lot to do with the suppression of my creativity. It was the suppression of a very important part of myself. So I moved forward, and life was slow, and I had to slow down, and I had to take extra care of myself for years and years after that. And it really helped me have empathy and patience and receive love. And all of those things were super helpful in me starting my own business.
Yeah, amazing. This is really amazing, being that you were able to kind of though it was demanding, able to pull out, and also the universe having to test you to see how ready you were. Yeah, it was really a whole lot of back and front. Yeah, I'm glad that you were still able to pull out and do what you do today. Yeah, it's really amazing. So you often say we can retain our brain through what we wear. Can you explain how clothing influence confidence and behavior?
Yeah. We do a lot of things in our daily life to enhance our lives, right? Some people meditate, some people exercise, some people journal, some people have long walks and conversations with friends. In the same way, every one of us has to get dressed every day. And I find with my clients that two things happen, probably 100 things happen, but I'll talk about two particular things. Either they are in a rut with their clothes and it doesn't represent who they are. Their clothing hasn't evolved over time, and they feel like they're just kind of on repeat every day. So their lives are changing. They're getting married, they're having babies, they're starting businesses, they're getting divorces, they're, making friendships, but their clothes are staying the same. And so there's this misalignment, right? Like I am in one way stuck back in the past, and in another way, I'm moving towards the future. So that's one thing. And the other thing is around hiding. So there's a really interesting perspective shared among people, and often women, that Black is slimming. And that if we wear Black, we can look skinnier. And we can also essentially disappear or hide parts of ourselves that we're uncomfortable with. From a brain perspective, every morning you're saying, I dislike myself or this part of myself. It is not good enough. Therefore, I'm going to choose this color to hide it. That, because I'm working as a psychotherapist, I do a lot of training in the brain. How do we retrain our brain? What are we telling ourselves that continue to deepen the neural pathways that are either positive or negative for us? So if I wake up and I say, yep, still don't like myself, I'm going to put on something that makes me thinner. I'm saying I'm not okay, and I'm not good enough to go out in the world, and I don't have the courage to show up as myself. Okay, so then we've got these neural pathways, and then we've also got this habituation happening where we're just stuck in place. So imagine what it would be like to start to build neural pathways that allow you to love yourself wholly and entirely just as you are. And at first it feels fake. It is super uncomfortable for a lot of people. So we start to lessen the amount of Black that we wear. We start to avoid baggy clothes for the sake of covering things up. And we just start to live into clothing and style that is more representative of who we are, and we start to build neural pathways in a different direction until it is actually the truth of what we believe. So it's kind of if you've heard fake it until you make it. So you just do it until you actually believe it to be true. And with that, it's almost like a reverse engineer. You actually start to love yourself because you're pushing yourself to wear things outside your comfort zone, to say, I'm not going to hide. And you do begin to love yourself in those parts of yourself. And honestly, it's not as scary as we think, because the reality is people aren't judging us as hard as we think. And for those who are being judged by partners, parents, friends, etc., that might actually mean that those are the wrong people. So all of this combined, then you're like, okay, these aren't the right people for me to be around. So what does it look like to have friends and partners who really love me as I am? And then think about how all of this, it's just a domino effect of confidence, being around people who love you as you are, feeling comfortable in your body, your brain believing that you're good enough to show up in the world. And then with the habituation, we've got to bring the gap closer between who we are and how we're dressing. So we have to live holistically by, if we're saying, I really love apples, but we never eat them. It's like there's a dissonance there, right? Like I'm growing, I'm evolving in my business, I'm doing new things, I'm getting ready to get married or something like that. But we're dressing in a way that is so reminiscent of a time in our life where we weren't growing or we didn't have the business that we had, etc. There's that lack of alignment is not breed confidence, but once we do align who we are on the inside with what we wear on the outside, we start to feel more like the truth of who we are and who we are becoming. And that breeds confidence. Confidence is, one of the major pillars of my work. So I could talk about it all day long, but those are a couple of examples.
Yeah, amazing. This is really amazing being that when you actually being intentional about it, yeah, it boosts your confidence and a whole lot of things. Let's go. Yeah, it's really amazing. So closet organization might seem simple, but you tie it to mental clarity. How does decluttering your wardrobe impact your mindset?
Yeah. So how does it impact your mindset? Your mindset, I'll start with an anecdote. I'll start with a story. So I have a client in Scotland who started her own business, got out of a marriage, is like making major changes in her life. Her daughter is becoming a preteen. So yeah, both her kids are becoming preteens. And so they're moving into different phases of their life. Everybody in the house is transforming. And so she really, really wants to get an opportunity to stand on a very big stage and speak her truth of her business and show up and teach things to people all over the world. And so we bought a dress that hangs in her closet right across from her office desk that is representative of what she would wear the day that she is going to be on that stage. One of the first things that happened within a month is that she got a smaller speaking engagement. So she's already building the stepping stones towards that larger speaking engagement. And every morning, it's like, when we ask ourselves, what's going to be our primary focus for the day? Or how are we going to, what's the one impact we want to have today? She looks at that dress right across from her desk all day long and says, this is my primary goal in my business, is to be able to speak on this stage. So it changed her mindset. She's not, it clarifies everything. She's focused. And then everything she does in her business is all with the intention of taking it to that level.
Yeah, this is really amazing thing that but just by changing or the intentionality, changing some of our wardrobe, right? Really inspire the fact that yes, we show up differently and we start small and then it actually more like start degenerating into bigger step. Yeah, it's really amazing. So in today's digital world, Zoom, social media, content, how can people show up confidently on digital stage through their style?
Yeah. During COVID, a lot of people really appreciated in the beginning not having to get dressed for work. It's like kind of nice to be able to wear your sweatpants to work at first. However, something that ended up happening, and my business about a year into COVID started really, really had a big growth spurt because people started saying, I wake up, I'm still halfway in my pajamas. I roll over to my home office. I do my work. I roll out of my home office. And then I just start, cooking dinner, doing whatever else I do afterwards and then go to sleep, repeat. So there was no distinction between sleep, life, home life and work. The distinction started to really lessen. And that gets blurry, right? We get dressed in the morning to go to work because we're we're embodying this person that we are becoming in that space. We come home, and if you're like me, I'm like out of these clothes immediately and into my comfy clothes. Don't want to wear them another second, right? But that's because in my home life, I'm much more relaxed and I don't need to be as put together. I've got people who love me here just as I am, and I have no one to impress, and no expect. So, that is a good moment where I say, okay, I am leaving this space, my brain, I'm going to turn off work and I'm going to come into this new space and put myself in that position as a presently in that position. So also the thing that happened during COVID is people just sat around in sweatpants and they just felt bad. They started to feel stuck. They lost a part of their identity. And of course, we were all struggling in many ways with our identity, our friendships, what we could do in life, and all of that. And so this was one element of struggling with identity. And finally, people started saying to me, I really, really, really want to get dressed for work. And so how can I do that? And now that I know that I love sweatpants, how can I change my outfit in a way that is elevated and helps me change my mindset so that when I come to work, I feel differently and I act differently without having to lose the comfort, because we still love the comfort. People wear way fewer high heels. Suits are almost a thing of the past for many people. And, everybody's like, I learned comfort in COVID and I am not going back. However, I do want to look nice and elevated. I want to feel really good. And so there's that element that I was supporting people with. And then there's the Zoom piece. I don't know if you've heard of the concept or your folks have heard of the concept of Zoom mullet, where you look good on top and not on bottom. Like you're like in sweatpants on bottom, but you've got your like earrings in your hair and you're like from here up, right? So that's your Zoom mullet. And what'll happen is that it doesn't necessarily bring you fully into the role that you're in. So if you have a big role that you are in and you're wearing sweatpants, it is still, despite what we may think, hard to embody that full essence of that leadership role. And it just feels disjointed. It's like going out into the world to a gala or a theater event and you're wearing a really nice top and you're wearing pajama bottoms. Like you wouldn't do it in real life because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel good. It feels discordant, but so you shouldn't do it there. And I will tell one story. I have a client of mine who's currently about to publish a book, and she had an interview on NPR, the National Public Radio here in the United States. And she was in a black box. She was not face to face with the interviewer. She was just by herself. She had the questions had been given to her ahead of time. She wore slacks, heels, a button-up shirt, or like one of her nice button-up shirts. She had her earrings on, her hair done, her makeup done, things that would all indicate I'm going to work. And this is on national public radio. The interviewer completely flipped the script on her interview questions and brought up not only a different set of questions than she had been prepped for, but really controversial questions. And afterward, without even thinking about how valuable this statement is, she said, I'm so glad that I had my high heels on because it kept me on my toes. And I was like, that's it. Like, that's it. That changed the way that she was able to respond. She felt like an expert. She felt ready. She felt prepared. She was really put together. I mean, I don't know if there's any better explanation of what I do than that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Marisol, for what you do. So for my audience who would love to connect with you, to reach out and for consultation or to actually get any of your projects or to connect with you, how can they reach out to you and where's the best platform?
The one thing that they can do is they can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, and it's at Soul Reflection. So that's SOL Reflection. And then also I have a tiny URL, soulreflection.com/free. And that will take you to an opportunity to schedule with me a free 20-minute consultation. And what we'll do in that consultation is I'll use kind of my therapist facing brain to listen as you talk about the growth that you have in your life right now. And then I will listen for the way in which I interpret style to apply to that growth. So, somebody says, I had a baby, my baby is now 3 years old. I've been dressing in a way to take care of my toddler, and now I'm going back to work and I really want to dress in this particular way. But the last time I got dressed like this was, 3 years ago. And so I will take that little nugget of information and I will very quickly and rapidly help you define your style just in that 20-minute period. So that's Soul Reflection, SOL, reflection /free.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Auriso. And definitely, I'm going to add that link to the show notes so that my audience can easily reach out and easily follow you on various media. So, yeah, it has really been a pleasure having you on the show. You just remind us that style is more than clothing. It's powerful tools for self-expression, confidence, personal growth. Once again, for my audience who would love to reach out, check the show notes. Then you see a link to actually more like reach out to her. Once again, it's a pleasure having you on the show. All right, so
Thank you so much, Arobanaya.